Have you ever delivered something ordinary like a pizza only to find yourself caught in the middle of something far more sinister? Welcome to my viewers. This story is one I haven't told in years, mostly because I try to forget it ever. My name is Chris. This happened years ago, and it's something I actually forgot about until recently. I was 17 that summer, working nights at a pizza place on the outskirts of my childhood hometown. I wasn't thrilled with it, but with no money and two parents who would have killed me for being unemployed, I couldn't complain. It was one of those jobs you take because nothing else is hiring. Slow shifts, sticky uniforms, and a beat-up delivery car that barely made it up hills. At least I didn't have to drive my own car. That would have sucked. Oh yeah, not that this is super relevant, but I do want to mention that the pizza was god-awful, like genuinely terrible. I couldn't understand actually. I still don't understand why anyone in their right mind would order from that spot. If not for the technology and relatively nice atmosphere it provided, I honest to God don't think we ever would have gotten a single order. That place is definitely the thing I missed the least about my childhood hometown. And that's saying something. The one saving grace about working there was that because the pizza was so bad, or because the place itself was so far away from our downtown, or maybe a combination of the two, people rarely ordered from us, so most nights were dead quiet. I'm not going to bore you with the mundane details about how my nights typically unfolded. It was a pizza place. I'm sure you could fill in the blanks yourself. One night, I was restocking the fridge with drinks when the tablet buzzed with an online order, large sausage and olive pizza. I remember that distinctly because we never got olives. The address was out in the middle of nowhere, past the edge of our delivery zone, and I remember getting ready to reject it out of habit. But before I could, my manager, this 30-something guy named Russell, who mostly sat in the back, scrolling through Reddit, looked over and told me to take it, saying we hadn't had a single run in over an hour. I didn't argue. So, when the pizza was ready, I typed in the directions on my phone and grabbed the pie. At least it would kill 30 or 40 minutes. As I was about to leave the store and walk to the car, I looked a little more carefully at the delivery instructions. Russell had printed and stapled to the box, which I hadn't paid attention to until then. They said, and I remember this word for word, park on the street behind the house, walk through the backyard, knock on the back door only. That caught my attention a bit, but my 17-year-old brain thought of several rational reasons why someone might not want me to use the front door. Maybe they didn't want to wake an old person or a young child in the house. Maybe the front door of their house was being renovated. Maybe they wanted to hide the delivery from a parent or spouse. It really could have been any number of things. Plus, all I could think about was how slow the night was and how much longer it was going to feel if I sat around folding boxes. So, I just decided to do my job. But the second I stepped outside, I started having second thoughts. It was one of those summer nights that felt like walking through soup, hot, humid, and completely still. Like even the air was stuck in some kind of invisible jelly. I don't know if this will make sense, but there's this stale, sour smell you get when it's really humid and still out, sort of like old plastic and sun-baked dirt. That's what it smelled like out there. I hate that smell more than anything, but it was unavoidable. I had the windows down for maybe 2 minutes before giving up and blasting the AC. The delivery address wasn't in the direction of downtown. It was actually in the exact opposite direction, even though the pizza place itself was already kind of in the middle of nowhere. The drive was supposed to take just over 25 minutes, but it felt longer because of how empty the roads were. I'm definitely exaggerating a bit. It's not like there were no houses for miles, but it was much less dense the further I drove. When I finally got to the address, I realized I was coming up behind the house. The GPS had routed me along this skinny little side street that ran parallel to a set of backyards. There weren't any streetlights, and the houses didn't have back porch lights either. It was all shadows. I remember slowing down and double-checking the house number because it looked totally dead. There were no lights inside and no cars in the driveway, just the sagging backyard with overgrown grass and a rickety wooden fence that didn't even close all the way. But still, I followed the instructions. I parked right there on the gravel, grabbed the pizza, and walked up the incline toward the back door. I had the pizza in one hand and my flashlight in the other, angling it down toward my feet so I wouldn't trip on anything. When I got to the top of the hill, I saw the back door. It was one of those old white ones with a small pane of glass at the top covered by a cheap curtain. I knocked and waited, but no one answered. I knocked a second time, knowing that my manager would be livid if I returned to the store empty-handed. After no response, I was about to knock a third time when I saw the curtain move not a lot. Just this tiny little twitch, like someone brushed it with their finger. It was fast, and I don't think I would have even noticed if I hadn't been staring at the glass. I stood there for another few seconds, expecting the person who was clearly standing right behind the door to finally open up. But before that happened, I noticed two unmarked cars pull up to the side street behind my car. My first thought was that I was about to get in trouble for trespassing or something. One of the car doors opened and someone stepped out. Even from the house, I could make out that it was a man in the light of the other car's headlights. The guy motioned for me to walk over to him, which is what I did, assuming that he had ordered the pizza and that I had beaten him home from work or something. But as I got closer, I realized he was flashing me something in his hand. It was a badge. The guy was an undercover police officer, which I was able to ascertain because he wasn't wearing a uniform's just normal clothes. As soon as I got within a certain distance of him, he told me to head back to my car and wait there. That was it. That's all he said. So I did. I backed away slowly, climbed into the delivery car, and sat there watching. That's when I realized there weren't just two officers. There were 5, maybe more. All of them had flashlights, but none of them said a word. They moved stealthily, circling the house like they were trying not to be seen. Not one of them knocked or announced their presence, which I found strange. It was a pretty bizarre sight. I remember one of the officers reaching for the back door handle, the same one I had just knocked unarmed, gently trying it. When it didn't open, he just nodded at one of the other guys and backed off. It felt like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to see, and I guess I was. Eventually, the first officer came back to my car and crouched beside the window. I rolled it down and he looked over the pizza box on the passenger seat and let out this short sigh. He was relatively vague with what he told me, but he didn't seem like a tool, just that he was trying not to say too much. Basically, he said that there was an ongoing investigation involving that property and that he, along with the rest of the officers, was staking it out. He apologized for taking so long to intervene and told me that I had pulled up the exact time they were repositioning their vehicles. I asked if he wanted to see the delivery order and he nodded. I pulled it up on the delivery app, but I could tell it was useless. There was an associated phone number with the order along with the delivery address and the first name, Jerry, but it didn't seem particularly helpful. The officer read it, took the number down, then told me to leave immediately. I expressed my frustration to him, saying that my boss was going to kill me for returning with the pizza, and the guy just shrugged his shoulders. Then he repeated his instruction for me to leave and started walking away from the car. I was pissed, but there was nothing I could do, so I drove off. It took me the entire ride back for the whole thing to sink in. I didn't really grasp the gravity of the situation until stepping out of the car. If the police hadn't intervened when they did, something awful could have happened. I don't even know what. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the threat of the police was probably the only reason the person didn't open the door to accept the pizza. But why would someone order a pizza if they were being staked out? Maybe the person inside the house didn't know they were being watched. Or maybe they did, and I was part of some test run. Like maybe I was the bait to see if the cops were watching that side of the house, or if they left. The curtain moving, the silence, the timing. They don't know. What I do know is that I will never get an explanation for what happened. And thinking back to this incident is mostly a waste of time. I probably would have forgotten all about this if one of my high school friends hadn't brought it up the other week. I didn't even remember it at first. It's probably best I forget about it again, but I figured I'd share it here before that happens. Tonight's story is one I never imagined I'd be telling, but it's real, and it still shakes me every time I think about it. This happened just last year. I'm 40 now, married with 2 boys, ages 7 and 5. I work in insurance, which is exactly as boring as it sounds, but we're stable, and that's all I care about at this point in life. A couple of years ago, my dad passed away after a long, painful bout with cancer. He left behind a beach house down in Delaware that I'd never even visited before. He used to rent it out year-round. It wasn't anything fancy, but it sat just 1 block off the boardwalk with a beautiful upstairs deck that gave you a clear, peaceful view of the ocean. That deck became my favorite place in the world. After my dad died, we started spending more time there. Weekends, full summer weeks, it became our little family tradition. My wife and I loved it, but the boys loved it even more. They'd spend hours playing on the beach, riding bikes, chasing each other through the sleepy beach town like they owned it. That house started to feel like the last true gift my dad had given us. This story takes place during one of those visits last summer. We had gone down in Missoula Sunday to Friday, one of those stretches when the crowds thin out and the beach feels like your own private paradise. It was a Wednesday night. The boys had knocked out around 9:30 after a full day in the sun. Wife and I were on the back deck, sipping wine and playing cards under string lights when our older son, Jordan, came out. He looked off, kind of pale and uneasy. He told me he kept hearing a scratching noise in his room and couldn't sleep. Figured it was just the usual creaks of an older house. I told my wife to hang tight and followed him downstairs. His room was quiet at first, but after about 20 seconds, I heard it too. A faint scratching noise, low, subtle, but definitely real. I crouched down and pressed my ear to the wall near his bed. It wasn't from the rafters or pipes. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall, low, near the baseboards. Then I heard it breathing. Not a rodent, not an animal. Slow, deep, unmistakably human breathing. I flinched and whispered Jesus before I could stop myself. Then came the screaming, enraged guttural howl from inside the wall. I grabbed Jordan and yanked him out of the room, panic exploding inside me. We ran to get Scott, my younger son, who was still asleep. I scooped him up and ran. As we reached the base of the stairs, I screamed for my wife, and that's when I heard it again, another scream, closer this time. I turned and saw a man covered in grime, charging down the hallway at us. I nearly tripped going up the stairs with both kids in my arms. We burst onto the deck, and I slammed the sliding glass door shut just as he hit it full force. He started pounding on the glass like an animal, smearing dirt or blood across it, screaming things I will never forget. My wife grabbed the boys and pulled them away. I held the door with all my strength, praying it wouldn't shatter. He shrieked and clawed and kicked. I was ready to fight to the death if I had to. Then, thank God, the police arrived. 2 officers burst into the house and tackled him. After they dragged him out, we searched the house together and found a crawl space I never knew existed. From a hidden panel in Jordan's closet and from beneath the back porch. The man had been living there for months. A detective later told me the man had discovered the crawl space in the off-season and had been using it as a hideout. He said we were invading his home. He'd been stealing food from our pantry and the neighbor's trash. He was waiting for the night he'd reclaim his space. We didn't return the rest of the summer. I hired a team to completely seal off the crawl space, and eventually we felt safe enough to come back. We're using the house again this year. It's not quite the same, but we're reclaiming it too. One sunset at a time. Tonight's story is one that still gives me chills years later. It's about a quiet summer night, a bottle of wine, a shooting star, and something that fractured reality in a way I still can't explain. I grew up in a rural area, the kind where you could ride your bike for miles without seeing another soul. Like many people, summer was always my favorite season. It still is, honestly, but ever since I left the countryside, it's lost some of its magic. There was something about the warm silence, the endless openness. It made me feel like I had the world to myself, like I could disappear and no one would know. Summer nights, in particular, were a kind of magic I've never been able to replicate. I was 16. I had a friend named Taylor, more adventurous than me, always one to push boundaries. One July night, we decided to go stargazing. 2 bikes, a blanket, and a cheap bottle of red wine. Nothing new, we'd done it plenty of times before, but this night was different. It was the last time we'd ever do it together. We didn't have a destination, just a direction. Taylor led us past the edge of town to some abandoned farmland she'd heard about. We pedaled until all signs of civilization vanished. No buildings, no lights, no fences. Just open land and the clearest sky I've ever seen. Taylor stopped suddenly and said, "This is it." I looked around, no landmarks, nothing specific, but somehow it did feel like the perfect place. We laid out our blanket and popped the wine open. The taste wasn't great, but it didn't matter. We talked, pointed out constellations, and waited for a shooting star. I remember Taylor asking if I thought we'd see one. I said probably not, but to keep watching. And then we did. Just one. A streak of light that cut across the sky. We both squealed and laughed and made silly wishes. We were tipsy, a little buzzed from the wine. The night felt infinite. At one point, Taylor looked at me really, looked at my hand. I felt something I hadn't before. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the wine. But something shifted in that glance. I didn't act on it, didn't ask about it. That kind of thing wasn't openly discussed where we grew up. And besides, the moment passed. We laughed again and leaned back into the silence. That's when everything broke. I closed my eyes for maybe 5 seconds, just to feel the breeze, the quiet. But when I opened them, Taylor was gone. Not just wandering nearby, gone. Her bike, gone. No sign of her anywhere. My bike was still there, but the space beside me was empty. I sat up fast, called her name, spun around, but nothing. I felt panic settle in my chest like a cold weight. And then I noticed the stars. They looked dimmer, not clouded, but distant. Like I had entered a version of this place that didn't belong to me. I pulled out my phone. It said 3 a.m. Sharp. The time is burned into my brain. Before that, it had barely been midnight. I blinked again. No change. Had I fallen asleep? I was sure I hadn't. And even if I had, Taylor wouldn't just leave me. She'd never do that. I called her name again. Dialed her number. Nothing. No answer. No trace. The silence of that field, once peaceful now, felt predatory. I broke down crying, grabbed my bike, and pedaled harder than I ever had in my life. That ride back was pure fear. When I finally got home, I collapsed into bed. I barely slept. I texted Taylor first thing the next morning, expecting an apology or at least some explanation. But what she sent back shook me more than anything. That had happened the night before. She said I was the one who had disappeared. Word for word, she asked, "Where the hell did you go last night?" She claimed she had woken up alone at 3 a.m., just like I hadn't thought I had ditched her. She waited, then biked home, angry and confused. According to her, I vanished. And from my view, the exact same thing had happened. We went back and forth, trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. No memory gaps, no missed calls, no texts. Even though we both remembered calling each other, there was no record of it on either of our phones. Eventually, ... We stopped talking about it, not out of boredom, but fear. I think we were both too shaken to keep digging. Something happened that night that we couldn't and still can't explain. I would lie awake for weeks afterward, staring at the sky out my bedroom window, wondering, replaying, searching. Taylor and I never went stargazing again. Maybe once, but the magic was gone. Something had broken. Years have passed. We've lost touch, but I know she still thinks about it too. That summer night, that one impossible event in a field that felt like it belonged to another world. Whatever happened out there, it wasn't normal, and it still haunts me. Thanks for watching. If this story gave you chills or made you question your own memories, hit that like button, subscribe for more eerie encounters, and leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced something that just didn't make sense? I'd love to hear your stories. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars. You never know who or what might be watching.